Hello, 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 and welcome to Walk, Talk, Health. Aging and disease are primarily caused by two factors: DNA damage and chronic inflammation. As the channel name suggests, you and I are going to take an amazing walk today, and we're going to discuss a topic that can have a major effect on both of these and your health. If you combine, however, all the topics we discuss on a series of these walks and talks, it can have an enormous effect on your health, your well-being, your longevity, and you really can live longer, healthier. So where are we today? Well, we're at the beautiful Howarth Park here in Santa Rosa, California. And today we're going to talk about berberine, which is a naturally occurring compound found in some plant roots and tree bark. We're going to look at firstly what are the main benefits that berberine has on the human body. We're then going to talk about how exactly does it have those benefits, how they derived. We'll then talk about what dose to take, how to take it, and then finally we'll have a recap. So I hope you enjoy the walk and what we're about to discover. I'm looking forward to it. I hope you are too. So what are the main health benefits of taking berberine? Well, the big one is reducing blood sugar levels. Very important in the fight against diabetes and in the prevention of blood clots. It can improve digestion. That's important because the better our digestion, the more nutrients are taken into our body, which we need from a point of view of health and repair. It can improve insulin resistance. In other words, the body doesn't have to produce as much insulin to have the desired effect of removing sugar from the blood. It can improve mood through the gut-brain connection, which we'll cover later. It can reduce body fat, and who doesn't want to lose a little bit of body fat, plus it has health implications. It can reduce inflammation, which for me is always a major one, because we know that chronic inflammation is the cause of pretty much every major disease we face in today's society. And finally, it can improve the structural integrity of the gut barrier, which obviously is there to protect us and make sure things that are not supposed to get into our blood are kept out. So that's a pretty big one too. As an analogy, I'd ask you to think of berberine as like a nightclub bouncer. In the same way that a nightclub bouncer wants to eject the undesirables, berberine does the same thing, but in our gut and our digestive tract. It kicks out, knocks out things like E. coli and encourages things like bifidobacterium to party on and produce more short chain fatty acids, which is important as we'll discover later in this walk and talk. So how does berberine achieve this amazing list of health benefits for us? Well, it actually turns on a switch for AMPK. Once activated, what it does is tells the liver, for example, that can actually produce glucose, glucose being the body's form of sugar, and it can tell the liver to dial back the amount of glucose it produces. The liver actually produces glucose in times of high demand where we need extra energy, but too much sugar in the blood will cause all kinds of issues. For example, you get glycation of the red blood cells. Now that literally is the sugar, the glucose that's in the blood starts to stick to the outside of our red blood cells. Now those red blood cells, of course, are actually carrying oxygen and nutrients to every part of our body and every organ in our body. So if you now coat those blood cells in sugar, what we're doing is we're restricting firstly the amount of nutrients that can pass through the membrane of the cell, and also oxygen in terms of getting it into the cell membrane, past the cell membrane. The next problem, of course, is that that sugar, that glucose, is sticky. So now what we're doing in effect is thickening the blood and making it more likely that these blood cells will actually clump together, which of course then can form clots, and those clots can go on to cause heart attacks and strokes. If the blood cells actually stick to the lining, the wall of our blood vessels, that can cause inflammation, and as we know, chronic inflammation causes disease. At the end of this trail, it takes you down to ground level, and if you can see it through there, there's actually a beautiful lake. You get to walk around. The walking trail continues from the mountain part of this down and round that fantastic lake. So the AMPK switch tells the body, in addition to reducing glucose production in the liver, it tells the cells in the body to start uptaking sugar at a much higher rate and burning it. And by doing that, it's physically taking it out of the blood and creating energy. Now, because it's producing more energy, our metabolic rate increases, and therefore the ability to burn fat comes along with that higher metabolic rate. Because the amount of sugar in the blood reduces, the need to produce insulin, which is the body's natural defense against too much sugar in the blood and the thickness and the clots risk that it causes, is to reduce the amount of insulin that the pancreas actually produces. This is important because insulin is also inflammatory, and we're trying to avoid inflammation and DNA damage, as we said at the beginning of this video. Diabetes, stage 2 diabetes, in fact, is a problem whereby the body produces more and more insulin to try and basically turn on AMPK and to try and remove sugar from the blood, that in the end it can't produce enough to reduce that sugar from the blood, and it pretty much just gives up and stops working. And now, of course, you have to take insulin injections to replace the fact that you're no longer producing it naturally. So basically, berberine mimics insulin in terms of what it does in terms of reducing sugar in the blood, and therefore the body doesn't need to produce as much insulin because the berberine in effect is assisting it. Berberine also quiets down the production of the enzymes that turn carbohydrates, so that's rice, bread, pasta, anything that's sugar-based, chocolates, unfortunately cake, all the things we love, into glucose. So less sugar being produced, glucose being produced, means less sugar in the blood, and therefore less need for the body to produce insulin to combat that sugar. The key to many of these benefits is these short chain fatty acids I mentioned. By encouraging the good bacteria to be healthier, to multiply, kicking out the bad bacteria, it means they produce more of these short chain fatty acids. The short chain fatty acids are what are responsible for the reduction in inflammation and for strengthening the colon cells that are in the wall of the colon, which is giving us that stronger barrier. And the big one, reducing inflammation, is down to these short chain fatty acids. Studies also show, although the mechanism is not completely understood, that it can reduce both cholesterol and reduce the insulin sensitivity, and then the having more of those good bacteria in the gut, that's where the chemicals they release when they digest our food send signals to the brain, and that's what helps improve our mood. So in studies where people who had mild to moderate diabetes, they gave them 500 milligrams of berberine 3 times a day, and it produced, on average, across a number of these studies, 30% reduction in blood sugar level. Now, they needed to take it 3 times a day because they already had a disease, as in diabetes, and therefore keeping a constant blood sugar level reduced by 30% was a pretty major effect. In fact, studies showed that berberine was just as effective as the leading pharmaceutical drug, Metformin, in terms of the percentage it lowered that blood sugar level. Now, if you're healthy and you don't have any signs of diabetes, maybe you had pre-diabetes, but you're not actually got to that stage yet, then something like taking berberine before a meal, involving carbohydrates in particular, can reduce, again in studies, the blood sugar levels, or in terms of how much makes it through into the blood, by 15 to 20%, which is pretty considerable. And again, therefore reduces the amount of blood sugar that the body has to remove, and therefore reduces the amount of insulin the body needs to produce, and therefore improves insulin sensitivity. I take 550 milligrams. It's just the dose my berberine comes in once per day, just before a meal. It's probably important to point out that berberine can cause stomach issues. So my advice would be, a recommendation would be, to introduce this slowly. Maybe take berberine just once, see how you get on with it for a day. If there's no adverse reaction, it is only a small percentage of people, but nonetheless you don't really want to experience that. Then maybe take it on day 3 and see how you are. Maybe then take it on day 5, and if there's no ill effects after that, you can probably start taking it daily without any issues. I should also point out that berberine should not be taken with grapefruit juice. There's some kind of adverse reaction it has to compounds found in grapefruit and grapefruit juice. And finally, and an important one, is that it can also interact with certain medications. So as I often say on these walk and talks, if you are taking medications prescribed by your doctor, your primary physician, I would definitely speak to them before you start taking berberine, just in case. As with all supplements, it's important to make sure you get a quality berberine supplement. I always look for third-party testing and make sure that there's no additional fillers or things in there that shouldn't be there. Quite often if you read reviews, the customer reviews on people that have taken a specific brand, and then once you narrow down the brand that seems to be popular with people, perhaps do a bit of research on the company itself. You know, where's it made? Is it made in the US? Does it have those all important third-party testing? That's just general advice for any supplementation you might consider. I think that ivy is very happy on that tree. So it's that time again to ask for your help. This channel is in no way monetized, and its sole purpose is to reach as many people as I can to help them on their health journey to living longer, healthier. So can I ask a big favour? Can I ask you to hit the like, subscribe, the bell notification if you want to be notified of my next video when I release it. But most importantly, can you please put a comment or ask a question around this subject for this video? The algorithm, YouTube algorithm, uses that interaction in particular to decide which ones are engaging, and it then disseminates it out to more and more people, which will then help me in my goal to reach more people and help them. So by helping me, you're helping others, and I thank you in advance for doing that. There are some beautiful views from up here down over the park. Actually, I'm not sure of the elevation. I'll look it up and I'll bring it up over the footage. I'm guessing probably 200 to 300 feet nonetheless. And now we're about to start the journey back down the hill. Let's go, see what else we can find to show you. It's a very pretty walk. Certainly recommend it, and we'll see what you think in the comments perhaps. Not something you see in Northern California that often. In this particular walk, there's cactus everywhere. Here's just some of it. I'll show you some more in a minute. Massive rocks dotted about. Only wonder how on earth they made it here. Probably some kind of glacier moving them up the hill or something, but pretty impressive, huge. One last thing on berberine, which I think I forgot to mention. In terms of the improved digestion, that's because it encourages a good friendly bacteria called lactobacillus, which is key in terms of producing enzymes for digestion of the food we eat. And so by producing more of lactobacillus, it improves our digestion, which means the nutrients that we derive from the food we eat get into our body, and that helps everything, you know, from fighting inflammation to health, to repair, to fighting disease. So improved digestion is actually quite an important one, and I almost forgot to cover it. More amazing cactus. Pretty certain these have been planted by the homeowners. There's houses all there along the back of this park. I mean, that must be amazing, right? Being able to just step out your back door and into this beautiful park. As you can see, the cactuses go on into the distance. Okay, so let's recap. Berberine main health benefit is reduction of sugar. It does this by activating the AMPK switch, which tells the body to start absorbing more sugar, glucose, into the cells and to burn that glucose, thereby reducing the amount of sugar in the actual blood. It also acts as the nightclub bouncer, if you remember, but the bouncer for your gut, and it basically kills things like E. coli, the bad bacteria that produce toxins, and it encourages the good bacteria to produce short-chain fatty acids, and strengthens the gut integrity, the actual wall of the gut, particularly the colon, by feeding it nutrients to make it as healthy as it can in its fight against stopping unwanted things passing across into the blood. Berberine also reduces cholesterol in the blood, which can be a factor in terms of heart disease. It also, if you remember, the body produces as much insulin as it needs to remove the sugar from the blood. If the berberine's already done that itself, then it doesn't need to produce as much insulin. Therefore, the body doesn't get as used to as much of that insulin production, and therefore we don't have that same risk of type 2 diabetes that comes with desensitizing the body to insulin. Berberine also helps our mood improve because the good bacteria release chemicals that communicate with the brain and make us feel better and healthier. And finally, for me, the big one is it helps reduce inflammation. And as we know, chronic inflammation is associated with every major disease that we face in society today. I hope you've enjoyed this walk and talk. I really have. Join me next time when we will be talking about spermidine, another natural supplement which I think will blow your mind in terms of its health benefits. Thanks very much for watching. Join me next time.